Good afternoon and evening. Today I'm interviewing Louise Järsberg, who is a BTS ARMY member in Stockholm, Sweden. And Lollo, as she likes to be called, had written to me a long comment on one of my live streams earlier this week. And she brought up a lot of very interesting points. And so I thought she and I could have an interview about it, and it might be helpful to other members of the BTS Army. So I have her comments on the screen. I'm going to put them on the screen, and then we can talk through them. So before we start talking about your comments, I'd love for you to tell me how you first became aware of BTS and what's going on in Europe in terms of the fan base for BTS, and especially in Sweden, obviously, and and then what, if anything, you know about Jungian psychology or psychology in general. So, could you talk about those things first?
Yeah, I discovered BTS in late 2016.
Mm-hmm.
I actually been a K-pop fan like way before, but I had taken a break because being a K-pop fan usually takes up a lot of your time because there's always so much going on. So you have to you spend a lot of time on the internet. And I didn't have time anymore. So then when I did feel like I had time and it was kind of hard on me personally at that time. So I guess I kind of took time to do something that made me happy. And I went back to K-pop and I found BTS. And then uh, first the music kind of appealed to me, but then the more you watch, the more you get to know them as people, and that's when you're hooked.
Yeah, okay, terrific. And so, what's happening in Sweden and Europe with
um,
BTS?
I believe that in Sweden we like they are aware of BTS a little. Like they play them a little on the radio, and they've talked about them on TV a few times, especially when they broke some record or something. So I believe that in the Nordic countries, that Sweden is one of the countries that are most aware of BTS. Um, but in Europe, it's more like in Germany, in England, like UK, they're pretty big there.
Mm-hmm.
But we as like a European fandom, we actually collaborate a lot and we try to speak to each other a lot to try and make it bigger here because it's a kind of the music industry here is a lot harder to penetrate because
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, I don't know. Like K-pop should be like the thing for Europe because I don't know if you ever heard of Eurovision.
Eurovision, I certainly heard the name, but not much. I don't know much about it.
Well, it's like this big music contest, and it's very um, weird music sometimes. It's not like pop music really.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we love when it's like a big spectacle on the like the performance and stuff. So K-pop should be perfect for Europe, but it's still haven't really gotten there yet. Even though it's grown bigger the last couple of years.
So, what percentage of Swedish young people in your generation would have heard of BTS as of today? We're 1 week before their new album is coming out, so I'm
Well,
interested.
they're gaining more fans like each day. It feels like, especially the last few years, because they have been like more visible, both on TV and in radio. Uh, and I also feel like we have a lot of young fans in Sweden,
Hmm.
but I've also seen like more older fans getting there these past couple of years too, which is
Hmm.
really fun.
Right, and of course, I'm very excited about them because I've been trying to educate people about Jungian psychology, And of course, most of the people that are interested in that up till now have been old fuddy-duddies, not people in your generation necessarily yet. And so it's been like pulling teeth to educate people. And I kept thinking about how can we get psychological education into schools so that people learn about themselves and what's going to happen during their life better, so that we have fewer divorces and things like that in the future. I'm very hopeful for that. And, you know, as I did divorce one time after 17 years, but I think that if I had had my Jungian training before that happened, I probably would not have been divorced. But because I didn't know any better, even though I was highly educated, the divorce just happened and it was unstoppable. And that was a big pain for me in my life, because it meant that I missed most of my daughter's growing up years. Now, fortunately, my ex-wife and I did it fairly maturely, so I kept my relationship with my daughters right through. And so today, now that they're in their 40s, or my youngest is near 40, she'll be 40 next year. Now that they're in their 40s, I don't know any difference from how they would be if I had stayed with their mother. But, you know, I did miss their growing up years in large part, and that is a tragedy to me. That's a mistake and a pain, and very painful for me. So that's why I've been interested in psychology. And all of a sudden, fortunately, I'm intuitive, so all of a sudden I realize that BTS is coming around. They're a global sort of number one band, and they have an album coming out about Jungian psychology. I said, wow, what an opportunity to educate the world and go around the education system, because, you know, we could never do that in the education system in the US, because all these religious leaders would object for one reason or another, and it would never get into our curriculum. I'm going to put up your comments from the other day. Before you start to read them, I'd just like to ask you to tell me, you said that you're becoming interested in Jungian principles once again. So tell me about your background in psychology and with Jung also.
Well, I actually hadn't heard about Jung before. We didn't study that when I studied psychology, because in Sweden we kind of major when we do high school,
Mm-hmm.
and I majored in social studies, and then you also do psychology for 2 semesters. And we studied more like not philosophies, but just diseases really. So we didn't really get into how to cure it, or how to handle the diseases. So, but I actually did want to be a psychologist when I was younger, but then I felt that it took too long, I guess.
Right. And of course, most of the things that go on in our psyche, everything that we know is going on in our psyche. And most of the things we have going on in our psyche is not a disease. It's not a psychological disease. Okay. I mean, when you say you were studying things like schizophrenia and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And so you were studying sick people, but I'm interested in healthy people, you know, who don't really understand their own body and how their own psyche works. And that's what Dr. Jung made available to us. And so that has been my interest. But so let me put your item back on the screen, your comments, and then you know, you can either read from the first paragraph or read from question number 1, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So since I watched the video that you made, so I made comments on what you said.
Right.
And you used the BTS appearance on major award shows as one thing that differentiated them from the norm, which I then assumed was K-pop in the US.
Okay, well, first of all, let me say I know nothing about K-pop in the US. And for about the last 30 years, I have known almost nothing about bands because, among other things, I'm getting deafer. But besides that, I have other things, a lot of other things going on in my life. And I found when I was 40 that I could just turn off the radio, and then I was getting lots of interesting stuff from my own unconscious. And so I really haven't listened to popular music with a few exceptions. I mean, I sometimes when I want to get in a mood, I'll play a certain piece for one reason or another, but generally I don't. So in order for a group to break through to my consciousness, it takes some doing. Right? And so the fact that they've differentiated themselves, I only mean with me. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead.
Yeah. But that's like usually when people from America look at them, they see that, oh, but they have done this in America, and that's why they're so much better than usually other K-pop groups. But since I've known them a little longer, before they were that big in the US, I also saw how they already were different from the K-pop industry where they started, because they didn't like stick to the norm, which K-pop is usually like bubblegum pop, or it doesn't have to be. It can be darker, but usually it's about love, and it's like in the beginning, it was supposed to like attract fans and like play on their emotions, and especially like for them to see them as a love interest,
Right.
which is very great, I guess, for them because it worked for the first couple of years, and it still does, I guess.
You were talking about how they differentiated themselves first as a K-pop band, and secondly from K-pop. And I actually have a woodblock print from my time in Japan on my wall that I'm facing, and I always think of this image, and I wanted to share it with you. But the idea of coming through twice is really, really important to this, what I'm about to show you. So, okay, so that picture is called Wasurerareta Mon. And what that means is forgotten gate. And so this image, this artist was a friend of mine, or is a friend of mine. His name is Joshua Rome, and he went out behind a temple in Japan, and he found an old gate of that temple that had been taken off the temple and moved in the back. Okay, so the gate was a forgotten temple once because it had been taken off the temple and put in the back of the temple. And then, as you see here, it was covered with plastic to protect the roof, and so it was forgotten again because then they didn't take care to keep the plastic in good shape. So this is the forgotten gate, and it's actually the twice forgotten gate. And the reason this is significant is this is my metaphor for how to succeed in business, which is what BTS has precisely done. Okay, because what you have to do metaphorically is you have to pass through a gate that no one else sees. Okay, and because this gate shows twice forgotten, it's the twice forgotten gate. So you have to go through the forgotten gate and then the second forgotten gate, okay, which is a psychic metaphor, okay? But the point is that's how you can break through and be a world-renowned band, which is what they've done, okay? And so do you understand my metaphor and why I like
absolutely.
Why I like this image so much?
We usually say that because we don't face the same problems in America as we did in Korea, but we still face like racism and everything like that, and like the people think that you can't listen to it because it's in Korean and all that. But we say like we have already done this once, so we're gonna do it again. We can do it again to like fight through everything.
Right. So in order to succeed, you have to pass through the twice forgotten gate, and that's what this gate means. So, and that's what it means to me, and why it's been on my wall for 30 years. Just for the record, how long I've had that picture. I've actually had that picture since 1983 or 84. So now I'm going to put back your comments and let's go on. Okay, so here are your comments again. So go ahead with, and I understand, okay.
Yeah. Wait, where?
You were three, I only let you get 3 lines into it, so.
Yeah, yeah, when I was talking about how the K-pop community worked before, I'm not saying that other K-pop groups didn't write their own songs, but they still just talked about love or partying or how cool I am or whatever. So they still try to like appeal to mostly like women, and for them to have them as like a love interest, and that's why they don't really date, because they have to be available. It has gotten better like the past couple of years, but when BTS came, it wasn't that common. And like I said in the comments, instead of saying that you could be with me, they said that we understand you and that we have been through the same thing and that we're fighting with you. And I think that's why they have so many dedicated fans, because they're not there. They're there for you instead of they're there with you instead of something that you can fantasize about or whatever.
Right. Instead of a light love interest, they're there to suffer through life with you and see the issues. And so what they're doing, from my point of view, what they're doing is they're expediting the next level of consciousness that the human species has to go through. And that's what Jung's work was all about. It was about breaking through to the next level of consciousness that our species has to get through in order to not destroy ourselves ultimately. And, we built nuclear weapons, for example, for whatever, since 1945 or 43. But a few years into that, 10 or 20 years into that, some scientists figured out that if you actually exploded 23 nuclear weapons in the atmosphere at the same time, you would destroy all life on Earth. And of course, we have hundreds of or tens of thousands of nuclear weapons now that we've built. And so our president, for example, says, well, why don't we use nuclear weapons? Well, we don't use nuclear weapons because we don't want to destroy ourselves and the planet with it, with them. He never understood that, and unfortunately. And so we have to get smart enough so that we can all understand that there's no use for these weapons anymore, because if we use them, then we're going to destroy ourselves. And Dr. Edward Edinger, who was a famous Jungian analyst, once said, we're either going to become all one thing, or we're going to exterminate ourselves, one of the two. And he was talking about over thousands of years, perhaps, but the point is that we're all tending toward coming together. I mean, when I speak to you, if I didn't know you lived in Stockholm, I would think that you were an American girl. And, maybe 20 years ago, your English would have sounded much more Swedish to me. And even, 30 years ago, when I started to work in India, the English that was spoken in India at that time we called it English, which was an English that they learned from the British. So Indian speakers of English in those days sounded like Brits, like UK residents, if they were high language type of users, but everybody was speaking with a British accent. But today, because of the internet and because the United States is so predominant on the internet, the English that's used on the internet predominantly, with the exception of the UK, I suppose, is American English. And so today, Indian speakers sound like Americans. They don't sound like British anymore. And so, we are starting to come together as a species, and that's a process that's going to continue on because we now are connected. We're all connected. We're talking about a band that's in Korea now. When I was in 1962, when I was 15 years old, I went to Japan and went to high school in Japan, to 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. And at that time, it was like going to the end of the universe because for the next 2.5 years, I never once spoke to my grandparents on the telephone, for example. And we only had letters back and forth. And during my high school years, we had no television. Because even though we had it in the US, in Japan, television wasn't working very well at that time. It was still only 15 years after World War II. And so television itself wasn't working very well. And there were no English programs anyway. I mean, maybe I would have learned Japanese sooner if I had had a Japanese television. But in any case, but nowadays, Japanese speakers of English speak like Americans too. And so anyway, the world has gotten very small, very much smaller. I mean, when I left Japan in 1964, I took a ship from Yokohama to San Francisco. It took 10 days to go across the Pacific Ocean. And today I can get to Japan in 12 hours. And and it's like, boom, tomorrow morning I'm going to be in Japan, whatever. And actually, I've done that many times in my career now because I've actually flown around the world about 75 times. But anyway, so they said they wanted to understand you, and you feel understood, and you're understanding them too. Is that right?
They talked about what they experienced, and that's like what people in their country as well experience, and people around the world. That's what I know. They're the one who owns their company. They told them, like, you need to speak from your heart because otherwise it's not your song.
Right. And that's a terrific piece of advice that they got. And do you know anything about that man? His name is Bang, and it so happens that I have 3 Korean American grandchildren because their father is a Korean American. He was born in Korea, and his name is Bang, and their name is Bang. So I have 3 grandchildren named Bang. so this Bang gentleman, do you know anything about him? Bang PD, you mentioned.
PD is like producer. He used to be a music producer before he started the company.
Uh-huh.
And he did like some hit songs in Korea, and then he decided that he wanted to take he wanted to make a group, but on his terms, how he thought that they should be, kind of.
Awesome.
So he broke apart from the company that he was working for and then made his own.
Terrific. Okay, so go ahead and read your point number 2, and let's see what else we get into here.
I think if I remember correctly, you were talking about that they got support from their parents, and that so they could thrive instead of being leveled down, I think you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to point out then that it wasn't so obvious that they got support. I know that most of their parents did support them in their decision to pursue music. I also know that Jung, or Suga, as his stage name is,
Mm-hmm.
was not supported by his parents because they didn't see a future for it.
I see.
So it wasn't until he got more successful that they actually supported and liked his decision.
Yeah, that's very typical of parents all around the world. They always want their child to become a doctor, a lawyer, or a university professor. and and so if you want to be anything different, then you have to break away from your parents pretty much. I mean, even if you stay in the house, you have to somehow change, get yourself educated another way. And that's the excitement about the YouTube. But go ahead. So you were saying, and so by the way, I'm learning this about BTS because you were the first. You weren't the first actually, but you were one of many BTS Army members that contacted me and told me the real story of their rise and the difficulties they had both with their families and with they pretty much raised themselves, if I understand it correctly. And then, so that was one gate that they went through. And then the second gate was that they had to break free from the K-pop genre in general also. So I probably have had 100 BTS Army members tell me that on various comments on the YouTube videos that I've made. And this is only in the last week. Mind you, I was only conscious of this band for about the last 10 days. So I'm scrambling as fast as I can to get up to speed because I know that they represent a tsunami and I have to get on my surfboard and ride this wave. So
Well, yeah, we're very passionate about them, so we don't because it happened so fast for them in the U.S. Everyone thinks that they've always been successful, and then we know that that's not it, and we don't want the people to discredit their hard work that they've actually been through, because it's been hard on the fans as well.
right, I'm sure that that's true. And the one thing I wanted to comment here, though, you say they pushed through a lot of leveling down from the entertainment business, and I just want to comment that that's what society does with everybody. Okay, society wants you to be a good little Swedish woman and produce 3 good little Swedish children who will be perfect, and uh, they don't want to. They don't want you to be break out of anything. They want you to be in that mold or the mold of a white Swedish woman in the world. They don't want you to have interest in Korean men that you can't even speak with, and that sort of thing. And that's what society does. And we all have to understand. Dr. Jung's term for this was individuation, which means that you have to basically raise yourself. You have to um, decide what it is that yourself wants to do. Okay, that's what that's what you have to
That,
do.
that's definitely what they did.
Right. So yeah. So it's not just because they were leveled down. It also happens to all of us. We're all leveled down. But go ahead. So you said would
Well, what I mean with the entertainment business in Korea, it's like almost monopolied by 3 big companies,
sure.
and like everything has always, like all the awards and everything has gone to artists under their labels and no one else. So no one believed that what BTS was doing, or anyone else for that matter, would actually become successful, because it hadn't before.
Right. But that's what happens to all famous bands. I mean, it happened with the Beatles. And, I'll tell you very frankly, it's going to be easier for BTS than it was for the Beatles, because our parents, my parents, were coming out of the Victorian era. Okay, and so for them, classical music was a big thing, and so for my generation to even get interested in rock and roll, holy cow, nobody could even imagine that. But at least now, as we're adults and older people ourselves, we at least have been through it once, so we know something like that can happen, and and so that is going to make it a bit easier for BTS, but they still have to break through the prejudice of the fact that they're Koreans and they're singing in Korean and so on, and so they have a few more forgotten gates that they have to get through, maybe. Let's see. And basically, no one's going to help you do that. I mean, the fact that they found Mr. Bang to help them, boy, they were lucky.
Oh yeah.
That's terrific. But that luck is out there. It's available. I've been pulled along a number of times by people who have helped me in my career. You have to have strong bonds, and you have to be very, uh, you know, sure of yourself, what you're doing to take advantage of it. And so these young men are extremely individuated, or at least RM is. I haven't really heard the other 6 of them speak yet, but I'm very impressed by what it is they're doing as a group. So I'm very pleased about that. So point number 3 then, did we cover everything you wanted to cover in number 2?
I think so, yes.
Okay, let's do number 3 then.
But I think you said that it was great that South Korea allowed them to be that individual or something like that.
Right.
And and I said that maybe you've noticed that I did not think that South Korea really embraced them.
Okay, well, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it quite in that way. The point is that Dr. Jung said, and I think this was in the collective unconscious definition that I read the other day, Dr. Jung made the statement that it's a sign of a healthy society to have people who break out and then include them within the society without it destroying the society. Okay, so it's a sign of societal health that they didn't just get spit out by Korea right from the beginning. Korea has a K-pop industry, and obviously that's not fighting the Korean society. Korean society has integrated K-pop into the society. I'm not saying everybody loves it, but what I am saying is that the society is healthy enough to have it within the society and have them still be Korean and have it still be Korea and still have a K-pop industry and still have a BTS within the K-pop industry. Those are all signs of psychic health. And where a society can't take that, where it cannot take change like that or differences of attitude like that, then you have a sick society. And you see that in certain countries around the world where they're extremely authoritarian and you have to do it this way or you're going to get thrown out. I have friends that had to leave Turkey because they put on a play in 2013. So, it's a playwright and 2 actors and one of the designers of the play. They put on this play in 2013 and they literally got forced to leave their country. And so Turkey is not a healthy society in that sense because it couldn't make room for those creative people, and that's shameful, actually. But anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So there is, you meant okay. Because I just thought that I pointed out that they didn't accept them really because, but it was more the K-pop community than Korea per se. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that because the K-pop community came up with a lot of false rumors and everything because they didn't like that they were gaining some momentum.
Right.
So they try to push them down with the false rumors.
Yeah, that's all standard competition stuff. So, if you're going to do anything like that, you have to expect that your competitors are going to object. And, even me with trying to get on my surfboard to ride this wave, um, as soon as other people who are making videos about Jung realize what I'm doing, there are going to be copycats who are trying to do what I'm doing, and they'll downplay me and they'll say, why I don't know anything about Jung or whatever it is, and so that's just standard human nature, and you have to be ready for that, but it means you have to be have a strong enough ego to deal with it. And for me, I believe in a rising tide raises all boats. So I say more power to you. Go out and create a YouTube channel and do what I've done. And oh, by the way, let me know when you have 890 videos or 900 videos now. Because that's how many I've put on in the last 3 years without any support from anybody. Okay, really. And I've done that all by myself. So anybody else that wants to compete with me, have at it. But they're going to have some time to catch up. Anyway, so but you said, but is the fact that they were even able to do it all enough then? The fact that they were able to do it means that they have strong enough egos. And so that means making mistakes, like making lots of mistakes, and going through what I call the Job archetype many times. And the Job archetype is contest, defeat, lamentation, and rebirth. Okay, so if you think about the music industry as an example, you're familiar with the television program The Voice.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens with The Voice? The Voice is doing an amazing thing. They're giving young people the opportunity to try to be a rock and roll star, to try to be a rock star. Okay, and so when I was 14, and even when I was 60, for crying out loud, I would think that I could be a famous singer. But you hear my voice, and obviously I couldn't. And most people can't, but you get this idea, oh, geez, that looks like an easy life and fun, and I can get a lot of money and so on. So I'm going to do that. And your parents can't talk you out of it. So, in the United States, probably 50 or 60% of all the garages in the US have a electric guitar in the garage, right? Because everybody wanted to try it. But the problem is most of us can't. And so the wonderful thing about The Voice is it's letting everybody try and compete and then get defeated. Okay, so when you're defeated, then you go and lament and you say, oh, okay, I guess I shouldn't be a singer. So what should I do next? Should I try to become a lawyer instead? Or whatever it is. I mean, it can be anything. But the point is that when you have a defeat, then you go on to the next thing. But some people on The Voice, a very, very small percentage, succeed. Okay, they get to the top. And for them, it's keep going because they're succeeding. And if they're defeated, they can still succeed, but they have to never stop, refuse to stop. They just keep going. And I have told the story on the YouTube channel about Jascha Haifetz and that's one of my most popular videos, actually. But the story is one of Jascha Haifetz's students. He was a famous violinist in the 20th century. Came to him and said, well, his father had died and he had to make a decision whether he was going to go and run the family business or whether he was going to keep going and be a concert pianist. Or, I'm sorry, a concert violinist. Jascha Haifetz was a violinist. He wanted to play for the maestro and have the maestro make a decision whether he would go on or not. And he played Lark Ascending, which is this beautiful violin piece. And at the end of it, Jascha Haifetz says to him, "You don't have the fire. You don't have the fire." And so this guy is very dejected, but he goes away and he goes into business. 20 years later, Jascha Haifetz is playing a concert in his town again, and he goes backstage to see the maestro. And he's telling the maestro what he's been doing. And the maestro says, "Oh, you gave up the violin. Oh, how terrible. You were so beautiful. It was like phenomenal, this playing of the Lark Ascending." And the guy says, "But maestro, you said I didn't have the fire." And he says, "Well, I must have been right, because if you had had the fire, you would have paid no attention to me." And so the point being that if you're going to make it in the music industry, you have to pay no attention to the defeats. But if you're going to live an authentic life, you're going to go through many defeats. You should go through as many defeats as you can. Go out and try things, because that's going to lead you to the way your life should be. And so in the case of BTS, their life should be as musicians and dancers. And so, they got through, but most people can't do that and won't do that, right? So anyway, that's my little homily on this point. But let's see. So their backer took care of a lot of the problems in the back, which was terrific. And so you have to do things until somebody comes along and takes up your cause for you. So even me, in order to put together 3 years worth of videos on my channel, I had to have the fire to do that, and myself was requiring me to do that. My greater personality, my God image, was telling me, keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this. And I really had to wonder a few times why I was doing it. And then all of a sudden this comes along totally unexpectedly. I could not have possibly planned it or thought about it. And made it so that now I have a YouTube channel that's got 900 videos that is going to be very interesting to this BTS Army. But that's what it's for. That's, God works in mysterious ways, and that's what God has done with me and my channel. Okay. And that's one of the significant points about Dr. Jung's psychology, that Dr. Jung found the living God, where he lives, and how he goes about doing the work of the Godhead. And this is an example of it. This conversation we're having right now is an example of it. So anyway, all right, so carry on.
I also remember what you were talking about when I see the last part of my comments, because you said that it was great that they could talk about mental health and all that in South Korea, and South Korea accepted that. But I also remember how, because it is very stigmatized in South Korea, but it's like mental health and mental disease is not a thing. Because you just gotta cheer up and then you're fine. That's what many of their doctors think. At least that's also what, because it's a little more than a year ago now that one of the big stars in K-pop took his life, and he said that he's been speaking to a doctor for some time, but he had just told him that he just has to change his personality. That's what's wrong. Like his personality just has to be happy, and then you'll be fine. And I can understand that when you get help like that, you feel like you don't get any help.
Yeah, that's no help at all, actually.
No.
And obviously, we have a lot of psychiatrists that are prescribing drugs for depression right now. And the result is we've got a huge opioid epidemic in the United States, and we had 72,000 people die from opioid epidemics in the last year in the United States. That's a national crisis. And so we have to get doctors away from the idea that you can just give somebody a pill and they'll be all well. Or we have to get away from doctors who say, just be happy. Yeah, you can't just be happy. And it's a normal part of life and a normal part of the process to lament and then be reborn into the next thing or do the next thing. And we can't bring back our loved ones who died, but we can keep them in our hearts. And, so I've lost both of my parents and my brother. I lost my brother when he was 39 years old, 30 years ago. And obviously all those things are very sad, but the reality is I still have my parents in my heart and my brother in my heart every bit as much today as they ever were. Okay. And so in that sense, I haven't lost them at all. Yes, I've lost their physical bodies, but I haven't lost my love for them or anything about them that they were to me. But people don't teach young people to deal with that in that way, unfortunately. And this is why I think we need to train about psychology more. And you can't just be happier just because somebody says so, okay? And that's one of Dr. Jung's criticism about the church, is that the church wrote evil out of the system for 2,000 years. I don't know what your faith is, but he was looking heavily at the Catholic faith up until the year 1500, for example, and in his studies. And the Catholic Church has this idea of privatio boni, which means privation of good. And so basically that is saying, well, God is only good, and there is no such thing as evil. There's only the privation of good. And, but that's like saying that Hitler or Stalin were just deprived of enough loving kindness from their mothers, and these were evil men. Okay, and so evil does exist in the world, and we have to recognize it and address it. And one of Dr. Jung's big things is that evil is a great power, and we need to learn how to recognize it and deal with it. And at the same time, we can look around the earth, you can look around your room, and I can look around mine, and everything that you can see is the result of good, because the bad things get washed out of the system. Okay, and so there's no bad cathedral in Europe. Okay, they were all made based on people building something that they thought was good. They are good, they're quite beautiful, and so on. And if they were evil or bad, somebody would have torn them down years ago. And that's true of everything, every physical thing that we have in life. Obviously there are exceptions to that, and to the extent that bad things get built, they do sometimes, but then they get torn down and they get out of the system. And so today we have the residue of mostly good things, and to the extent bad things come up, they get torn out of the system by everybody. And we need to understand basic ideas like neurosis, because neurosis is something that is incurable. Okay, you cannot cure a neurosis, and neurosis causes a lot of depression, and so doctors keep wanting to give a pill for depression. But the point is that a neurosis, the great example of it in my society is our red state, blue state duality right now, where we have Democrats pulling in one direction and the Republicans pulling in the other direction. That's a classic neurosis, because a neurosis is where there's a duality and you're caught between the two, and it's pulling in both directions, and that causes a depression. But if you understand it and understand that's what's going on, then you can build a fence around the neurosis and put it off in a corner of your mind, and you can say, oh yeah, I know that that's there, but that's not the way I want to live my life. And so in terms of the red state, blue state duality in the United States, I can say, oh yeah, I know that's there, but the people on the other side are still my fellow Americans, and I want to be a part of a country that they're also a part of. And, the same would be true in Sweden, where whoever the opposition is still have to recognize them as Swedes, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, that's a homily. I'm doing teachings as we go on these interviews. Anyway, the point is, to have a healthy society, you have to be able to accept people like BTS. Now, let's go on to number 6.
And I just think that you made me think about something, that they had to, that they had to conform to the norms of K-pop then, to be able to rise above it, that you have to be a part of the norm to be able to be different from it.
Right, exactly.
Because a lot of BTS fans don't want to have anything to do with K-pop. They don't want BTS to be associated with K-pop, because K-pop has a very negative view. Like, a lot of people view it negatively because it has been such a produced thing. It's been a machine that just popped out idols that weren't really real, because they were trained to even have certain personalities.
Right.
And that's not what we associate with BTS, because they show a lot of themselves and try to be themselves as much as they can, with their fans and with their music and everything. But what people then forget, that they came from K-pop. They still did what K-pop is, which is the entire package of music, choreography, the visuals, and in music videos and the performances, and then the accessibility to fans, because BTS still communicates a lot with their fans. So that's what I pointed out. I actually talked to one of my friends after I watched your video, and she's like, I never thought about it that way. I was like, no, me neither, but that makes a lot of sense.
Well, right. And if you think about it, it's true of everything. Think of an oak tree, okay? An oak tree, every oak tree is different, but every oak tree is an oak, okay? And so if you look at the oak trees that are outside your house or on your highway, every one of them is different. There's no oak tree that's the same. And just like there's no rose that's ever the same. But you can still recognize them as an oak tree or a rose. And so what you're saying actually relates to BTS, because you can recognize them from a certain species of musicians and popular musicians, right? And so that lets you recognize sort of where they're from, and then here's the special one. It's like the oak tree that suddenly has golden leaves that grows into heaven, right? But it's still an oak tree.
Yes.
Right. Okay, terrific. Okay, going on to point 8 here, I guess. As someone else pointed out in the comments, the hair isn't really anything new. Maybe their visuals are somewhat new to the Western society. The hair, the colored hair, jewelry, and makeup, but it has long been a thing in K-pop. Does this then testament to their growth into the Western entertainment business and that they aren't looked down upon there because of how they look? I think in the United States we accept people. I mean, in popular culture, we accept people however they look, and even though differently still are, it's just not a loud majority. Would also the fact that they do write socially conscious lyrics be something that could be included here? Okay, I don't think the hair color is that significant. I probably mentioned it because, I'm not into color my hair at my age, but my friend, the playwright from Turkey, she has purple hair now, and I like it very much. So, you know, I do accept colored hair, and so being different is, one way to get noticed. And the social consciousness, there have been a lot of popular musicians who have been into social consciousness, especially in the 60s. Okay, back in the 1960s, we had this big run of folk music. Okay, and so there were Peter, Paul, and Mary, and other famous folk singers, Arlo Guthrie and Woody Guthrie, and those people. And they were definitely into social justice, and they were trying to stop the Vietnam War. And so, musicians, that's one of the things that musicians and all artists do, because all artists are bringing us information that we need to know from the other side, from the unconscious, things that we know in society. So for myself, during the 60s, I was the son of a naval officer, so I was always going to go into the family business, which was the military. And so it never occurred to me not to do it. And obviously a lot of my peers were protesting the war, and I wasn't, because I was going to go in the U.S. Marine Corps. But with 2020 hindsight, then I can say that the protesters, they were right. Okay, it wasn't that the government was right, but my role in society at that time was to be my father's son and to become part of a weapon. Okay, the Marine Corps is a weapon. There's no creativity in the Marine Corps. You're trained to do it, and when you get an order in the Marine Corps, you do it. So if you ever want to be in a war, you want the U.S. Marines next to you. That's a weapon, but it doesn't mean that's what I thought. I always thought that the Vietnam War was wrong, even before I joined. I knew it from 1962. I still joined the Marine Corps in 1967. And the reason I knew it was that while I was living in Japan, my father took me down to the pier, to the dock in Yokosuka, Japan, which happens to be the headquarters of the U.S. 7th Fleet. And he showed me a line of ships going out of Tokyo Bay, and he says, "See that? That's the Marines. They're going to Vietnam." And then he said, everybody in the military has either been to Vietnam, is there, or is going there. And I said, "Why, Dad?" And he said, "Because the generals have to get medals for their career." And I go, what? I was 16 years old or something like that. And I said, boy, that's a hell of a reason to have a war. So I was always against the Vietnam War because I didn't see it as something that was proper. But still, because it was the family business, I went into the family business, and that gave me the opportunity to learn why it was wrong, which I did do. And so now I have the experience and I know that it was wrong. Before that, I mean, for most demonstrators, they believed it was wrong because their life was threatened if they got drafted and went to Vietnam. And I believed it was wrong because of my conversation with my father, but then I went to Vietnam and saw why it was wrong. So I have the experience. I know it's wrong. I don't believe anymore. I know. So we
Yeah,
talked
that's also the
about,
constant lyrics.
yeah, we
But
talked about the
mostly in
lyrics.
popular music, because I know like country artists also talk about their own experience and everything.
Sure.
But I was talking about more like popular music that you can hear on the radio.
Right. Okay. So since most music I hear is about partying, drugs, sex, or love, either good or bad, that's sort of like the old way of doing it. And so now this is what we have in this move to the next level of consciousness for our whole species, which is, there's more to life than just getting married, having babies, and raising a family. There's more to it, and that's what Dr. Jung's position, interest was what is more to it, and the more is spiritual. Okay, there's spiritual things. So you have a duality that on one end of the spectrum is in matter, and the other end of the spectrum is spirit. And obviously, music is about raising the spirit or doing something with the spirit. Um, and but we need to take it up a notch. We need to get it more spiritual. Whereas partying, drugs, sex, and love are all about matter. They're all about physical things, right? They're not really about spiritual things. But you can't really have a bishop or a cardinal doing music about spirit and have anybody understand what they're talking about, right? And so we still have to raise the level of consciousness to this point where our spirit is raised up, even though some aspects of religion has been set aside, and so uh, this is part of the raising consciousness that Dr. Jung talked about. That's what I think. I mean, that's what I think BTS represents, is a new level when they're talking about interaction with other people, and they're also talking about topics beyond those matter related topics. Then we're getting into the more spiritual realm. It's not a hymn in church, but it's definitely helping you imagine something new in your psyche, and it's quite obvious not only in you and your demeanor, but also in this whole BTS army, that their spirit is being raised by these young men. Okay, so it's not your priest at Sunday's church, it's something else that they're pointing at, right? Some spiritual aspect of your life. And people are accepting a different narrative, absolutely, because that spiritual side of people isn't necessarily only about the Christian message. It's about something else, and it's something that is in everybody. It's not only Christians, it's also Muslims, it's also Hindus and Buddhists, and every other religion in the world, Zoroastrians. And so those narratives have gone about as far as they can go, and now there needs to be a new narrative. And Dr. Jung believed that new narrative was about psychology and understanding ourselves and understanding our own spirit and spiritual needs. And so when they're doing map of the soul persona, that's what they're addressing. Okay, they're addressing this new level. And so anyway, as
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because they did Love Yourself before, like Love Yourself ever before this one,
yeah,
where they try to like learn how to love yourself, and it's in all different kinds of love.
right. And so then you make this interesting comment, as well as the fact that the music is in a language that most people don't understand, but still love. And so the point is that in order to get to a spiritual level, you have to have a mystery. Okay. And I'm not talking about magic in the wooey woo sense, but I'm talking about something that's not concrete. Because if it's concrete, then it's a doorstop again, like a Bible. A Bible is a doorstop unless you put life into it, right? And so if things get too concrete, then there's no room for the spirit to grow and to see things. And so if there's mystery, and in this case there's mystery because you can't understand the words and these guys come from a different culture and so on, that mystery allows something to happen in your unconscious of everybody, okay, everybody in the world. It allows something to happen in that unconscious that we can't put our finger on, but it's spiritual, okay? It's not matter, it's spiritual. I mean, if you wrote out 10 pages of why everybody should care about BTS, and had everybody in the world read that, okay, that'd be the logos, and that would be meaningless. People would say, okay, if I have to read it, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to throw it in the trash, right? Because you're not going to have anything happen to you spiritually because somebody told you you had to read all these words. But the mystery is that in music, something spiritual does happen, and there is something mysterious, and that does attract you toward the spiritual end of the psyche, from the matter and the physical. You know, everything has to be something I can touch, like this pen. That's matter, but that doesn't help me very much spiritually. Okay, and my iMac sitting here is matter, and it doesn't do very much for either you or me spiritually. But then when we have a conversation across the Atlantic Ocean right now, there's something spiritual that happens there that's unconscious, and you don't know what that is, and it's mysterious, but it does happen. You see my point?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. Point 9.
It's actually kind of what you talked about before. That it's really good to keep in mind that you have to be somewhat part of the norm to be able to rise above it and be different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really much different from
Right.
what I talked about before.
Right, and that's what we talked about, the oak trees and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, and you said also, I love this fandom for having accounts such as AHC. You want to address that?
Well, yeah, we created a community because fandoms you can just like talk about BTS or whatever, but we also try to um, understand what they're trying to say and then make it so. So like with like AHC, the BTS tries to talk about their struggles and everything, so it can be easier for others to talk about their struggles. And then we have AHC who then say that, hey, if you have a problem still talking about your struggles to people you know, we're here for you, even if. And that's like they do it for Army, and we build this community because it's not just AHC. We have so many other accounts like like a kitchen that teaches other people to cook, and we have people who teach others to to be leaders and help people with making jobs and like we built a family and a community. Sometimes we joke that we could probably make our own country with us just everything that we're doing.
Right, and you even have 72-year-old American guys who put together a YouTube channel to
Yes.
talk to you about, and that's part of the whole system. So,
Yeah, we
yeah,
are a very engaging fandom.
absolutely. And I was so impressed when I was talking to AHC the other night, which is Army Help Center, for those that don't know. And there is an interview on this channel with them from last weekend. And I was so impressed by what they're doing because, most people do not have access to psychotherapy. I mean, even in a Western country where your parents have plenty of money that they could send you to it, most kids coming up wouldn't even think of asking to go to a psychotherapist. They wouldn't think that they needed it or wouldn't understand what it was.
Yeah.
And so most young people don't have anybody to talk to about mental health issues. And yet, if you're depressed or you're upset because you broke up with your boyfriend or whatever it is, um, those things can really set your life back. And, they can set it back for a week, or it can cause you to commit suicide. And so people need to understand their mental health and how it works. And if they are depressed, they need to understand that, oh, by the way, this too will change. There was this word that came up today called Enantiodromia, which is a very famous word. Comes from Heraclitus, but Dr. Jung used it a lot. And what enantiodromia means is the tendency of things to become their opposite. And so in American politics, we used to have the there were always bigots in the South, but the bigots in the South used to be Democrats. Now they're Republicans. So the two political parties swap sides, basically, over the course of about 30 years. That was an enantiodromia, the tendency of things to become their opposite. And so understanding that, if you're depressed, then it's best to know, this too will change. Okay, it's not the end of the world. And, you may have a period of depression and lamenting about losing a boyfriend or whatever it is, but this too is going to change, and then there will be a new opportunity. God will give you a new boyfriend to talk to, and whatever it is, but a lot of people think that it's the end of the world.
I didn't get to talk about One in an Army, but that's just because I'm very proud of them.
Say it again. What, you didn't get to
One in
talk?
One in an Army.
Oh yes, tell me about One in an Army, because I did see that on your statement, but I still haven't had time to look it up. So tell
Oh,
me
that's
about it. Please tell me about it.
they're actually like a fan initiative of armies, and because before the guys accepted gifts, so that like fans could send them gifts for their birthday or whatever. But then they thought it became too overwhelming, and they said like spend those kind of money on yourself. And then Army still wanted to do something, and they started donating to different charities. And then there was a group of fans that thought that we should do this together. So they do every month. They do they choose an organization, a nonprofit organization, and they encourage Army to donate to that. And then when it's a member's birthday, they dedicate it to that birthday member.
Terrific. That's very exciting. And
And they've been doing it for a year now, to this month. Yes.
so, can you remember an example of a charity that they'd given money to?
They've done thirst relief. Oh, sorry, my cat is all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, they've done thirst relief, where they supported their biosand filters. So they hire like local people in Tanzania to build biosand filters so they can have drinking water instead of having to cook it and then still maybe get sick.
Okay.
And I think they donated one for an entire village.
Okay, so I'm not hearing this well. Can you spell what you're saying? It's
biosand filters.
Sand.
Sand.
Okay, SAND.
Yes.
Okay, so these are biosand filters that are used to purify water. That's
yes.
what you're saying?
Terrific. Yeah, they did that for 1 month, and they what else did they cleft lip and palate.
So well, I'm sorry, again, I'm not hearing you well. Tell me.
Cleft lip and palate.
Oh, yes, there are doctors that are going around helping young people with cleft palates.
And yeah, so both the operation, but also like the aftercare.
Yes.
And they've just done so many, and they've done for an orphanage in Korea to take care of kids there, because you can't really adopt from Korea anymore. It's very hard to do that, but people still leave their kids to like family homes, because sometimes they can actually come and get them again. And they help those kids go to school and college and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's so many things, because they try to like do different things and in different parts of the world, so they can touch every part of the world.
Terrific. That's
it's a really cool thing. I'm really proud of it.
So could you on email send me a link to their website or whatever it is they use, because I can put that in the description for this video, and
sure.
That might be useful. And I don't know, do you want Army members to contact you for anything or not? This won't be this is not going to be part of the video, but
they can contact me. That's fine. We talk. All armies talk.
All armies talk. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
friends.
how should we do that? Should we use your email address, or how should we do it?
We can do my email address, or we can do my Twitter account. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So send me your Twitter account, because I'm not sure I have that.
Sure.
And I'll add that to the description of the video as well. That would be a good way to do it. And Twitter seems to be the main way that BTS Army is communicating. Is that right?
Definitely. We're everywhere, but the most we're most organized on Twitter.
I see. And how about on Facebook? Are they on Facebook at all, or
there are groups, but they're not there to organize. They're more there to chat and talk about boys, and kind of like that. In my experience, I can't say that's the entire thing, but yeah, they're usually a little younger. Not to be discriminating anyone. But
I see. Well, I've found quite a lot of older folks, not as old as me, but people in their late 40s and 50s and 60s who are very interested in BTS now. And you know, that what a thrilling phenomenon that is, to engage people in every age group in society or in the human community. I mean, that really does change the world. And you know, it's not something you could have planned. I mean, if 2 weeks ago I was sitting in my living room and I had to plan something that was going to change the world, this is the last thing on earth I would have thought of. But when I see it, I know it when I see it. And this is definitely going to be a major change as people become more aware. And I think, I don't know about the younger generation here in the United States. I don't know if you heard that yesterday BTS was nominated for 2 Billboard awards. And so, had you heard that yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, so you're right up on.
I was sitting in Sweden and had like the live stream on and everything. I was ready.
So when is the Billboard ceremony now? When they're going to decide?
It's on May 1st, I think 7, 8 Central. Yeah.
May 1st for Billboard. Okay.
Yes. So it's in the middle of the night for me.
And are you going to watch it?
It depends on what I'll be doing the day after, because usually if I go to work at 6 a.m. So, and the award show usually ends at 5 a.m. my time.
I see. And
So,
what is your work? Or sounds like
I used to be in nursing, but I've taken a break. So now I'm actually working. I don't know how to explain it. It's like where they make ham and meat stuff. So where they kind of like the butcher, but
okay, meat packing, a meat packing
kind of
industry. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting that you would go from nursing into meat packing. I guess meat that you're packing doesn't talk back like patients in nursing do.
Well, nursing has been very stressful the last couple of years, so I just kind of needed a break.
I understand. Nursing is a very, very tough profession. And I remember when my mother was dying, there was this beautiful young nurse who, something like you, maybe your age or so, and she was cleaning my mother's bedpan. And I said to her something like, "Oh, you're such an angel to be willing to do this." And she said, "Oh, no worries. One down, 20,000 to go in my career."
Yeah, that
Whoa.
sounds great.
Whoa, that takes a special person to be able to do nursing. So I'm always a big fan. I worked in the hospital industry for 25 years all over the world, especially in the Middle East and India and the United States. And so I've had a chance to see lots of doctors and nurses, and it has always impressed me what they do. And so more power to you when you get motivated to go back to nursing.
Oh, I'm sure I will. I just needed a well-deserved break.
Yeah, well, you're an angel to do that, no doubt. But anyway, thank you very much. It's lovely to meet you, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to interview you. And if you ever want to interact again, I look forward to hearing from you.
I'll be following you on your YouTube.
Okay, well, thank you. And so I'm going to let you go and have your Friday evening, though, because it's 9 o'clock, so it's time for party time in Stockholm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have my wine ready. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, take care of yourself, and thank you so much for the interview.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.